Hi everyone, and welcome to my talk at the virtual Jane Austen conference. I'm so excited to be here again for the second year in a row. I absolutely love coming to this conference and being a part of it. I think there are so many incredible conversations happening, so many incredible videos, and I'm really excited to get into our topic for today. And so my name is Tiffany. I am a recent graduate. I just got my master's degree in English literature. And not only are we going to be talking about my two favorite things, Jane Austen and Taylor Swift, but we're also going to be having a critical discussion on intersectionality, white feminism, and what it means to be a woman of color in both of these fandoms. Especially, I feel, at this point in 2023 when there's so much dialogue and conversation surrounding this. And so I'm so incredibly excited for you to join me today. And without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Jane Austen and Taylor Swift provide smart, formally brilliant takes on crucial social issues. Composing their respective literary works and music, they have each shown a space for female subjectivity as champions of their craft. While being hugely popular, particularly with women audiences, and critically praised, each has also been denigrated as, quote, less serious, for their both perceived feminocentric content and their popularity. Dismissed as frivolous and simple, Austen is now critically recognized for her complex prose. I argue that Swift's lyrics also cleverly utilize literary devices and narrative structures, and like Austen, she should be recognized for her formal effects as well as the effects she has on her fans. In this paper, I read Austen's Pride and Prejudice through Swift's lyrics. I gloss specific textual moments in Darcy and Elizabeth's relationship with lyrics by Swift, creating a collage of meaning that puts the two authors in conversation across time and genres and demonstrates their relevance and formal power. In addition to calling attention to the feminist power of both Austen and Swift's takes on the hetero-romance, the paper also interrogates and pushes back against claims that Austen and Swift both represent and support a vision of white feminism that is neither available nor useful or empowering for women of color. While my focus is not biographical but formal, it is crucial to note recent controversy, particularly on TikTok, about Swift and her previous association with, quote, known bigot, and what that association means for Swifties of color. As a woman of color, who is also a Swift and an Austen fan, I argue for both the value of Austen and Swift's popular expressions of themes of love, romance, yearning, and female subjectivity can and must be read through an intersectional framework. Swift has never shied away from inserting literary references into her albums, from obvious allusions to the play Romeo and Juliet in Love Story, Taylor's version, the countless nods to The Great Gatsby, and to reimagining the subtle theme from Jane Eyre in the song Invisible String from her Folklore album. Swift explores the theme of being tied together to a lover, an invisible string. She borrows this idea from Jane Eyre, expanding on the line Mr. Rochester says to Jane. In Jane Eyre, Jane and Mr. Rochester's relationship is much more tumultuous, and Swift explores more about the couple in another song on Folklore, Mad Woman. But in Invisible String, she specifically uses this metaphor to describe the two people in this relationship and how they've always been connected, their love was destined to be. All you are is mean, enemies era. Balls are plentiful in Pride and Prejudice, with the first one happening in the third chapter. This ball in Meryton is the first time the Bennet family and the new residents of Netherfield, including Mr. Bingley, his sisters, and Mr. Darcy, become acquainted. Elizabeth's sister Jane catches the attention of Mr. Bingley. Elizabeth has sat out multiple dances due to the lack of gentlemen. She overhears a conversation between Darcy and Bingley, Darcy refuses to dance, finding every woman in the room intolerable, complimenting Bingley for dancing with the most beautiful woman in attendance. Bingley suggests he dance with Elizabeth, as she proves to be agreeable too. However, Darcy responds with his famous diss. Darcy's initial admission and Elizabeth's understanding of and reaction to it drives the energy of the novel and the courtship, revealing the quote pride and the quote prejudice in each character and their complex negotiations to move to understanding and a romantic union. Swift details a similar scene in her song Mean, Taylor's version, with the lyrics,
"You, with your words like knives and swords and weapons that you use against me, you have knocked me off my feet again, got me feeling like a nothing, you."
Swift addresses someone who uses their words to wound her, detailing how this impacts the way she perceives herself. This sentiment can be felt by Elizabeth in the ballroom scene because she must sit back and listen to the vicious words Darcy utters. Makes a generalization here about the entire crowd, but one can assume with the way he spoke about Elizabeth, this criticism is one he holds of her too. Swift writes,
"You have pointed out my flaws again, as if I don't already see them. I walk with my head down, trying to block you out, 'cause I'll never impress you."
Darcy views himself as superior to others because he possessed a level of class through his status and wealth. In chapter 8, Elizabeth has come to Bingley's home to investigate Jane's recovery. She has gotten ill going on her infamous walk as prescribed by her mother to woo the affections of Bingley. Elizabeth cannot stay still, so she goes herself to spend some time at Netherfield. Miss Bingley and Darcy are engaged in conversation, the topic being Elizabeth and her muddy clothes. Bingley, with his jovial demeanor, remarks he did not notice any dirt on Elizabeth's petticoat when she first arrived, countering the rudeness from Darcy and Miss Bingley. Miss Bingley says to Darcy, quote, This becomes one of the many times where Elizabeth's character is questioned, mainly because of the choices she makes and how they differ from a woman of greater status, such as Miss Bingley. Prior to Miss Bingley saying that, she asked Darcy if he would allow his sister to do such a thing, and he sternly remarks, absolutely not. Bingley, the only person who is not speaking ill in the conversation, continues to praise the Bennet family and the kindness Elizabeth has for Jane. Elizabeth is absent in the scene, which makes the backbiting even more hurtful since it shows how Darcy still looks down upon her in the early stages of this relationship. Swift goes on to write about herself trying to quiet the noise of the person who continues to criticize her and admit her desire to impress him despite her disdain of his critical tongue. While Swift describes an attempt at silence, in fact, she, like Elizabeth, counters this masculine critical gaze and tongue with her own tongue. Her lyrics, of course, are the equivalent to Elizabeth's witty ripostes. In chapter 31, Elizabeth goes to play the pianoforte, as she promised Colonel Fitzwilliam. Elizabeth feels as though Darcy is antagonizing her by inching himself closer to the piano. She then remarks, quote, Elizabeth does not back down, even as she and Darcy continue to go back and forth, adding to the tension in the room. Swift tells a similar story of this leading into the chorus, where she writes,
"Someday I'll be living in a big old city, and all your gonna be is mean. Someday I'll be big enough so you can't hit me, and all you're ever gonna be is mean. Why you gotta be so mean?
Swift uses repetition as a musical device to reinforce how this person will continue to be mean, even when Swift has moved on to different things in her life. As Swift concludes in Mean Taylor's version, she repeats the same question, one that must be asked of Darcy.
Why you gotta be so mean?
Tell me why. Skepticism era. Darcy's whiplash brings Elizabeth on this journey of uncertainty where he says one thing, but his actions do not reflect his true feelings. Tell Me Why, Taylor's version, perfectly encapsulate this stage of their relationship where they're stuck between pride and prejudice. When Darcy proposes to Elizabeth for the first time, he has already hurt her by sabotaging Jane in Bingley, causing him to break Jane's heart. She rejects his proposal because even though he expresses, quote, that does not make up for the pain he caused her because of his selfish pride. In Tell Me Why, Taylor's version, Swift writes,
I took a chance, I took a shot, and you might think I'm bulletproof, but I'm not. You took a swing, I took it hard, and down here from the ground I see who you are. I'm sick and tired of your attitude, I'm feeling like I don't know you. You tell me that you love me, then cut me down, and I need you like a heartbeat, but you know you got a mean streak, makes me run for cover when you're around. Here's to you and your temper, yes, I remember what you said last night, and I know that you see what you're doing to me. Tell me why.
This song perfectly speaks to how Elizabeth feels during her confused era, down to the way Darcy has cut her down and let his mean streak overtake their lives. He will spend the rest of the text proving himself worthy of her love, but for now she proclaims, quote, these next trials they will face will continue to test if their love is true or worth fighting for. Not only does Swift express this conundrum in their relationship in Tell Me Why, Taylor's version, but also in The Story of Us, Taylor's version, which breaks down a relationship into, quote, chapters, showing how things can change so quickly and that the person you love can become a stranger. Elizabeth feels as though Darcy has,
I'm starting to think one day I'll tell the story of us, how I was losing my mind when I saw you here, but you held your pride like you should have held me.
they soon create,
This is looking like a contest of who can act like they're careless, but I liked it better when you were on my side. The battle's in your hands now, but I would lay my armor down if you said you'd rather love than fight. So many things that you wish I knew, but the story of us might be ending soon. Now I'm standing alone in a crowded room and we're not speaking.
only seeing each other awkwardly in passing, sharing unsavory moments, but those sparks inevitably continue to fly between them. A String That Pulled Me, Lover's Era. As I mentioned previously, Darcy and Elizabeth have this string that has connected them, and even in those moments, they did not know that their love was real or could last. they still were strung together. Swift's chorus in Invisible String perfectly encapsulates the lover in this relationship looking back on their history with the person they are now with. Swift writes,
Time, curious time, give me no compasses, give me no signs. Were there clues I didn't see? And isn't it just so pretty to think all along there was some invisible string tying you to me?
Elizabeth and Darcy remain connected to each other as they discover what that means for their future. Their storyline moves slowly, but they have something that ties them to one another. In the first 10 chapters of Pride and Prejudice, Darcy and Elizabeth have this fire that fuels their relationship as they still stand at a place of hostility. However, in chapter 10, Elizabeth receives the very same clue Swift writes about, and she ignores it. Quote, Elizabeth has rejected Darcy's request to dance with her, and the reader gains insight into Darcy's emotions and the way this becomes a tender turning point in their relationship. The narrator says, after the rejection, quote, little does Darcy know that the invisible string that ties them together knows no bounds and transcends those obstacles that makes their relationship unconventional. Swift uses the bridge, an invisible string, to further emphasize how this relationship was always meant to happen. She writes,
The string that pulled me out of all the wrong ones right into that dive bar. Something wrapped all of my past mistakes in barbed wire. Chains around my demons, wool to brave the seasons. One single thread of gold tied me to you.
There are many different scenes in Pride and Prejudice that capture this sentiment between Darcy and Elizabeth, but one storyline that truly emphasizes this invisible string is chapter 46. Elizabeth receives 2 letters which outline how Lydia has run off with Mr. Wickham. It is unclear if the two have eloped already, but of course this will bring ruin to the family's reputation. Elizabeth rushes to find her uncle, and as she opens the door, she is face to face with Darcy. He sees her distress and passionately asks what has happened. The two sit down while Elizabeth tries to collect herself and confides in Darcy what has happened with Lydia. He blames himself for this happening because he did not make Wickham's wickedness known sooner. This tender moment becomes one I think back to when I read the letter from Mr. Gardiner in chapter 52, where he describes what happened between Lydia and Wickham, stating how Mr. Darcy intervened, providing the money needed for the two to marry, and he even attended the ceremony. Mr. Gardiner opens Elizabeth's eyes to the love Darcy has for her and, quote, Darcy has placed
chains around my demons, wool to brave the seasons.
All because of his love for Elizabeth. They ultimately have their happy ending, proving that
one single thread of gold tied me to you.
A discussion on fandom, white feminism, and creating an inclusive space. Pride and Prejudice is a classic love story that breaks the confines of time and showcases a relationship many readers continue to be drawn to. Going through Taylor Swift's music helps further analyze Darcy and Elizabeth. By showcasing how the themes in Pride and Prejudice are timeless, Swift's music helps to provide that contemporary point of reference about the human experience of love and relationships. Feminocentric stories have been greatly criticized and dismissed as pinnacle pieces of literature, even though they highlight themes of love, loss, family, coming of age, social and political commentaries. However, there still remains an attitude where pleasure and literary prowess cannot live together, or that views hetero-romance as inherently anti-feminist. Throughout her career, Swift has been criticized and labeled as the woman who, quote, only writes songs about men. And the sexism in the music industry has impacted her deeply. Her 6th studio album, Reputation, touches on this hypocrisy, particularly in the song This Is Why We Can't Have Nice Things, and in Long Story Short off of Evermore. Swift manages to create a story in song length, even having released a longer song from her album Red, Taylor's version, titled All Too Well 10-minute version, Taylor's version from the vault, proving how she can break through what becomes expected of a female musical artist. Jane Austen's work similarly falls into the trap of being seen as just a romantic, quote, straight girl story, even though she provides social and gender commentary that shape the conditions of romance. Now, there have been many valid criticisms of both Austen and Swift, particularly the ways they represent white femininity, leading to the creation of fans who promote a white purist view of their art and push white supremacist rhetoric. Austen's work has been co-opted from people on the far right and white professors who refuse to examine her books through a more intersectional framework. In the article titled White Supremacy in Heels, White Feminism, White Supremacy, and Discursive Violence, scholars Dreama G. Moon and Michelle A. Halling discuss the role of white feminism in upholding white supremacy, which aligns with the way in which Swift and Austen are used by white feminists to mask their own role in enabling racism and white supremacy. Moon and Halling state, quote, embodies this gendered victimology, especially seen this year when she began to associate herself closely with, quote, known bigot, Matty Healy, or Ratty, as users on TikTok called him. Google searches on Healy display various stories of the lead singer of the 1975 making sexist and racist remarks towards the BIPOC community over the years. There was speculation from various tabloid sources that Swift and Healy were dating, but it was not confirmed by either party. However, the two spent time together and this was captured by the media. Swift is known for being private and only allowing the public to see aspects of her life that she feels comfortable revealing. The possibility of Swift dating Healy caused many fans to feel confused, hurt, and conflicted. Mehran Saeed writes on this relationship, quote, he echoes what Moon and Halling highlights as the flaws in white feminism. And as Rachel Cargyle says, quote, Swift has been criticized for her self-serving white feminism and complacency when it comes to social and political issues that do not personally affect her. While Swift no longer has this, quote, relationship with Healy as their, quote, breakup story was reported in multiple online tabloids, this brought up a lot of difficulties for BIPOC Swifties who are navigating what it means to be a fan. Swifties, who uphold her same white feminist ideology, came to her defense, saying things such as, she can date whoever she wants, it's none of our business, or why are you blaming her for his actions? Completely missing the point of the online discourse. She went on to releasing a remix of her song Karma with Ice Spice, one of the women that Healy spewed racist remarks towards, which left BIPOC and BIPOC ally fans angered, and then further pushed the rhetoric from those same Swifties. Comments online would say things such as, "If these two women are friends, then why should we get involved?" These instances have created further division in the fandom and brought to light issues that have always been present. Moving back to Austin's role in the discussion, Marcos Gonzalez writes about his own experience with being the only person of color in the classroom and how this further isolates POC, who aim to rightfully analyze and critique Austin's works. He writes, Alex perfectly sums up the danger inflicted by white purist gatekeepers who only want to read Austin through a white feminist lens, which in turn ignores the larger political and social content and the things unsaid in Austin's work. As a woman of color who enjoys both Swift and Austin, I tend to separate myself from Swiftie and Austin fans who champion this white feminist ideology, instead aligning myself with other BIPOC fans who have similar grievances and critiques. My adolescent years spanned the 2000s, and I received plenty of scrutiny for liking things that were seen as, quote, white, which further alienated me from feeling comfortable to talk about the things I enjoyed for fear of being ridiculed. As I get older, I realized two things. Firstly, how the harmful gatekeeping of literature and music makes it only acceptable for a specific group to derive pleasure from it. Secondly, how this also makes criticism of said work difficult to discuss because of the lack of nuance able to be explored. You can love something while also being critical of it. Now I am emboldened to share these passions and interests, especially with this degree of nuance and reflection. Ultimately, it is BIPOC and BIPOC ally fans who are at the forefront of these conversations, asking the difficult questions and calling out racism masked through admiration for Swift and Austin. There will continue to be many challenges faced by BIPOC fans because these gatekeeping purist fans will not stop. But the most important thing for us to do is to create our own online spaces on social media for enjoyment and dialectic. Also, uplifting those voices by resharing their content and showing solidarity. Thank you so much for joining me today for my talk for the virtual Jane Austen conference. I want to thank every single person who made this conference possible and everyone who has helped, answered my questions, and who truly has been such an integral part in allowing all of this to happen. Thank you so much for allowing me to share and talk about this topic with all of you. Please, I would love to continue this discussion, so feel free to write anything in the comments, as well as check out the description box. I have linked a playlist featuring the songs that I spoke about today, plus some of the songs that didn't make the cut, but I still feel like really encapsulate Darcy and Elizabeth's relationship. Go ahead, check out the link below in the description box. As well, in the description box, I have links to all of the different references that I talked about today if you'd like to read more about those. And you can go ahead and check out my website and my social media accounts. Those are also down there as well. Again, thank you so much for watching. Bye.
Ladies and gentlemen, will you please stand? With every guitar string scar on my hand, I take this magnetic force of a man to be mine.